Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! So, I'm 19, but look like I'm still in high school. And my little sister, well, she's 7, but could easily pass for a 5-year-old. Our family has some kind of age-defined gene, I guess. This particular day, I decided to take my sister to the mall as per my mom's request. It was shaping up to be a great time filled with shopping and pizza, until we ran into a woman who could have won an award for the most entitled person I've ever met. It was around 3:30 in the afternoon and we figured it was time to head home. As we made our way to the exit, an encounter with a woman in her 40s brought our mall adventure to a screeching halt. She wasn't accompanied by a child, but her husband was there, and he looked ready for some kind of showdown. It went something like this. "Excuse me, miss, but is that your daughter? You look too young to have a daughter." Quick note, my sister and I often get this kind of comment, so just for kicks, I decided to play along this time. Yes, it's my daughter. She was a surprise, but definitely not a mistake. I planted a kiss on her head to make it more convincing. "I'm sure a kid like you wants an older mommy, right? One who could take better care of you." My sister, feeling a bit uneasy, started to hide behind me. I exclaimed, what? "We'll take her off your hands. You seem too busy with school to have a daughter anyway." Oh, I was flabbergasted. Who in their right mind would make such a bizarre offer to a complete stranger? I thought maybe this was some kind of prank. Are you joking? This has to be some kind of experiment or something. "Are you making fun of me?" At this point, the husband says, "Please ignore my wife. We've been trying to have a child, but it hasn't been working and we can't adopt. Sorry, but we don't want your child." "Yes, we do." At this point, I looked down and saw this lunatic woman trying to grab my sister from behind me. "Come here, sweetie. It's okay, mommy's here." Okay, joke's over. I'm her older sister. Her real mom is 40 and is at home. Get away before I call the police. "I'm sure your mom won't mind." I couldn't believe what was happening. It felt like one of those hidden camera TV pranks, but this was far too real. The woman actually managed to grab my sister and began running toward her car, but not before I delivered a swift kick to her back. That was a moment I had to make the call to the police. The police arrived swiftly and thankfully, the woman was arrested. Of course, I pressed charges. Attempted kidnapping, after all, is no laughing matter. So she ended up being sentenced to a significant number of years behind bars. I still can't fathom who in their right mind would actually attempt to kidnap a child like that. This encounter was so surreal, but it served as a stark reminder that there are some seriously messed up people out there. My sister and I were lucky that day and we made it out of that mall safe and sound, shaken but grateful for each other's presence. So this happened earlier today and it was too perfect not to share with you guys. I work in construction as a foreman for a new house build, and the location is kinda strange. The house is 220 feet up a hill via footpath only. All of our materials have to come up this footpath by hand. It's a pain to manually carry, quite literally, an entire house up this hill. One of our saving graces is having the 2 parking spots on the street at the bottom of this hill marked with official no parking signs. Unfortunately, there is an elementary school about half a block away, and the parents of children seem to regularly, at least twice a day, think it's okay to park in our spots. Now, I consider myself a reasonable person, so if someone is parked in a spot so we don't have a delivery or a need to park a truck, I'll let it go. If we need the spots and there is someone parked there, however, I will ask them to move nicely, and most of the time they do so immediately. Until today, I get a phone call from the lumber delivery truck that is en route to our location. He says he'll be there in about 2 or 3 minutes. I let him know I will meet him on a street to make sure he has space to park. He is carrying all of the material to frame the roof of our house, which is a lot of really big lumber and will take easily an hour to bring up the hill. So naturally, I didn't want him parked in the middle of the street with his hazards on for an hour when we have a perfectly good parking spot for him. As I begin my trip down the hill, I notice there is a school parent sitting in her car idling assuming she's just waiting to pick up her child. I walk up to her car and politely let her know that she's parked in a no parking zone and we really need her to clear it to park a delivery truck. She scoffs at me and rudely states back, "I'll just be a few minutes and your truck isn't here. Take a chill pill, dude." Before I can respond, the giant lumber truck comes around the corner and I wave to him and then gesture towards him to the woman in the car who has now put her window back up to ignore me. I put on my best customer service smile and wave at her through the window. She puts it down halfway and angrily shouts, "What?" By now the truck has pulled up alongside her car and I politely ask her again, with a stronger tone of voice, to move her vehicle, reminding her that she's illegally parked in a tow-away zone. Then she gives me this wonderful idea. She says, "Can't you guys just unload around me? It's not that hard." I give her another smile and walk away, a brilliant plan forming in my head. I instruct the delivery driver to park as closely to her as possible and plug her in with a porta potty that is at one end of our reserved spots and a parked car that is parked just adjacent to our spots on the other end. He smiles because he immediately gets what I'm trying to do and proceeds to expertly plug this lady and her car into a little two parking spot jail. We unstrap the lumber and my guys begin moving material up the hill. Meanwhile, I call the police parking enforcement to let them know the situation. At this point in time, I wasn't trying to get her in trouble. I just wanted a record of why we were blocking part of the street so we don't get in trouble with the city. The very friendly traffic officer lets me know that she can be there in about 30 minutes and deal with the situation for me. Wonderful. As we continued to unload lumber, the child of the parent shows up, and wouldn't you know it, Mom is just now realizing that the lumber truck is parked so close she can't get out of her driver door to meet her kid. She awkwardly clambers across the inside of her car and stumbles out the passenger door, shooting glaring looks at me and the truck driver in the process. She loads her kid into the back and then begins to realize that she has no way of leaving. She comes storming up to me and the driver and she states, "I'm in a big hurry. You need to move your truck right now so I can go." Before I could respond, the driver gets a grin on his face and says, "Ma'am, in order to unload the lumber on a truck, we have to unstrap it. And per our company policy, it's not allowed to move the truck with any unsecured load on it. Sorry." This sends her into near aneurysm level of blood pressure. Meanwhile, I can barely contain my laughter. "Screw your policy, I have somewhere to be," she barks back at him. At this point, with impeccably convenient timing, the parking enforcement officer shows up and parks behind the truck. She doesn't see the officer arrive. And while the officer is still getting out of her vehicle, I just casually say, "Can't you just pull out around it? It's not that hard." With the biggest grin I've ever had, I watch as she realizes that I just used her line on her. "Screw you!" She yells and storms back to her car and angrily clambers back in through the passenger door and into the driver's seat. At this point, the officer is walking up to myself and the driver, and before she can even introduce herself, the mom in the car slams it into reverse and stomps on the gas, crashing into our porta potty and knocking it over, and then throws the car into drive and tries to mount the curb and drive on the sidewalk. The officer, driver, and I are staring in disbelief as she gets halfway over the curb and gets stuck. I can hear her screaming obscenities over the idling truck from inside her car. The officer promptly walks up to the door of the car and orders her out. My favorite part of the entire thing is watching her face go into shock as she realizes she just did all of that in front of a police officer. She gets slapped in cuffs as a parking officer calls for a second unit, and she is promptly sat on the very curb she tried to drive over. She sits on the curb yelling to the now two officers about how we told her she could stay there and that we never asked her to move. The traffic officer responds that she was the one who was originally called when she first refused to move and that she already knows what's going on. While myself and the driver are given a report to the second officer, my guys finish moving the remainder of the lumber and the driver finishes his statement and takes off to go to the yard. By the end of the ordeal, she was arrested, charged with child endangerment, her kid was in the back of the car the whole time, reckless driving, destruction of property, the porta potty, and driving on a suspended license. On top of all that, she also got her car towed, the kid went home with his grandma, and she went to spend some quality time in a cell. I never expected her to actually heed my advice to just pull out around it, but I think next time she'll probably think twice about parking in a two-way zone, if she ever gets a license again. I'm a bridesmaid for my best friend who is getting married on a weekend. She has asked me and the other bridesmaid to get to her house at 8 a.m. for her hair and makeup. She has paid for both of these for all of us, and the time was set by the makeup artist. I have a 1-year-old baby. Originally, I was going to stay at my mom's house on Friday, as she lives 2 streets away from the bride's house. Thinking about the plans though, is I'm working Friday, that would mean arriving at my mom's for 9 or 10 p.m., which might be stressful for the baby. I live about 2 hours away, so I've asked the bride if I can arrive at 9:30ish, sitting out from my own house 2 hours away instead of staying near her the night before. I think this will suit my baby's schedule better. She said this may mean I miss a makeup slot. She said I could do this, but I got the impression she was annoyed. Would I be the jerk for traveling down and arriving later? And now with some comments on the post. Someone saying, "You are the jerk. I'm sorry, but thinking that your friend has to move around her wedding plans to suit your schedule is entitled. I don't think messing your baby's schedule up for one night is that bad, as it's a one-off occasion. It doesn't matter what suits you more, it's not your wedding. You've had plenty of notice to sort something out, at least a month, as you said in a reply to someone else. It's your fault that you're bad at planning." Another commenter goes with, "You are the jerk. You should have planned better." A third commenter adds, "You are the jerk. You have plenty of warning about the time. Either drive to your mom's the night before or leave at 5:30 in the morning so you have time to drop off your baby and be there for 8 a.m. It was 2012, and I was at the height of my college enjoyment. I was living with my grandparents after a bad car accident which knocked some sense into my crazy life. And I was working hard to make my family proud and gain some traction under my fate. Having always gravitated toward art, I chose this as my major and pursued it with flying colors. I was consecutively making the dean's list, staying home instead of going out and soaking up every bit of knowledge I could to protect and ensure the success of my future. Heck, I was even taking summer classes to graduate early, knowing the sooner I get out of school, the faster I could start my budding career. It was all peachy keen until a new teacher was hired in the art department. We will call him Mr. Sen, as he was a tall, thin, sort of gangly type with thick rimmed glasses. All good, right? Excited to meet someone new who could teach me new things. Except Mr. Thin was not exactly the friendly type. In fact, I couldn't understand why he had gotten into teaching, as I had tried to warm up to him a couple of times and got nothing but frozen shoulders. No one could get close to him. He made awful jokes in the classroom, and it was clear he had some serious insecurities, and his ability to cope with his own issues came out in weird ways. Flashing out at students not doing what they were supposed to. Him making fun of and examples out of students not properly following instructions he had given with poor verbal direction, and ultimately making everyone feel sort of uncomfortable in his presence. We all did the best that we could to try and cope with it when going to class with him, and we stayed focused on the ultimate goal: learning new techniques and getting a passing grade. I had already had printmaking class with this teacher and knew what he was like. By this time, my grandmother's illness was getting progressively worse, fast. It didn't help that she was misdiagnosed and given the wrong treatment, and she was a pinnacle that kept our large family together. Thanksgiving, always at her house every year, traditionally being the binding factor that kept us all connected and grounded. She unfortunately was in and out of the hospital, chemo, and nothing seemed to be going right. I remember the silence coming over her slightly as she accepted her fate. As such, I missed a few days of school here and there to help my grandfather take care of her and make sure she was okay during his time working at the office. He hasn't retired, and I'm not sure he will. I did my best and most of my teachers were lenient, knowing full well the scope of my situation. I had even written a letter to Mr. Thin expressing our family's woes and my commitment to continue my learning track, though I was not physically present. Unfortunately, as I was scheduled to take a graphic design class as part of my required classes, I was grouped with Mr. Thin again as a teacher, something I wasn't exactly looking forward to as I got no response from my letter. But that I would do my best trying to focus on my education while my grandmother was slowly dying. Again, he made extremely uncomfortable jokes and made kids feel unable to do as he had commanded. Never directly saying it, but always implying that everyone was an idiot and that he held all the knowledge. That we should all be praising him for this great opportunity bestowed upon us to learn from him. It was grueling, reminding him of my family situation yet again. He pressed me about my absences in class and threatened to flunk me, giving no leeway or helpful solutions whatsoever. Eventually, I had moved out and down the street from my grandparents' house, and one Tuesday, I went to visit them and check in on my grandpa. As I pulled up to the house, I remember walking up the front curb seeing gurney tracks in the snow, and the house was empty. I knew this was bad. Eventually, I found my grandpa at the hospital and immediately joined him as he gave me the rundown. We made our way to her room and family slowly joined us day by day. I called the school to let them know what was happening, and advisors stated they understood and told me to make sure to inform my teachers so they were prepared to help. Everyone was cool with the circumstances except, you guessed it, Mr. Thin. Unbelievably, I wrote to him again to let him know the scoop, and he flat out told me I was lying, and that he expected to see me in class the next day. Mind you, I had just got done sitting with a doctor and a priest. Being informed these were the last moments, I lost it. I called the school back, pissed that I was spending this time defending myself and my family during this sensitive time. That I even had to go through this and having these minutes taken from me as I said my final goodbyes with my grandma. Trying to keep a collected head and be reasonable with outside personnel, they took note of this and let me know they would follow up, allowing me to focus on my family. She passed away. I grieved, and I went back to school in silence. My grades took a slight dip. I stopped making the dean's list, but made sure to pass my classes as it was still important to me, even though it was all so untimely. I stopped speaking with Mr. Sin until I finally confronted him about his attitude in my situation. He defended himself by saying that sadly, college kids apparently use a dying grandma excuse all the time to get out of class. Saying this, mind you, without even getting to me or my situation, without asking a single question about my living situation, what hospital she was in, and nothing. Just assuming I was another lying college kid trying to get out of class. I filed a complaint and presented the death certificate and my previous USPS, United States Postal Service, confirmed address at my grandparents' was a school stating the teacher had no right to treat me like this. I knew my case was weak. I was missing school, but I wasn't a screw-up. I felt I had to do my part and say something, even if it meant knowing I would have to go back the next year, knowing he still had an office in the art department, where I spent most of my time. Now to the juicy revenge part. Fast forward to the summer before my junior/senior year. Remember, I was doing summer classes, so was only in school for 3 years. I was out to dinner with my then boyfriend and 2 of his good-looking guy friends. We had a nice time cracking jokes with the sunset over the river canyon. I lamented that this was my last summer before my schooling started for the last year. But after some time had passed, I was ready to make a better effort in order to make my grandma proud from the heavens above. We get up to leave and start walking out after paying the bell, and as we start walking through the restaurant, lo and behold, I see Mr. Thin mopping the floor straight ahead in my walking path. He watches the 3 gentlemen in front of me head toward the exit, then locks eyes with me as I follow. I kid you not, it was like a slow-motion caption. Without even realizing it, by pure habit, he just happened to wave in slow motion as I walked by, watching as he froze with a mop in his hand. Turns out his contract was not renewed for another year, and I retook my graphic design class with another teacher and passed with flying colors, graduating with bachelor's in art and going on to work for a major tech company in data analytics, likely making more than him. Mind blown.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.